There are so many design tools out there, it's almost impossible for you to actually pick one that is good for you. And that's exactly what this video is about. I've been doing print on demand now for over 10 years. And in terms of design, well, I've been drawing and creating designs since I could pick up a pencil. So over 25 years, but specifically print on demand designs for the last 10 years. So I have quite a wide grasp of what design tools are good, what design tools aren't good, and basically which ones you should pick. So you can see I've got my ranking system here. God tier, which is of course the best, worth a try, meh, wouldn't bother, and absolutely shite. So we've got a couple of cool apps. We've got Canva, Kittl, Photoshop, Affinity Designer, Illustrator, Figma, GIMP, Photopea or Photopea, and Inkscape. So let's have a look at all of these. And now we're going to look at them in a few different ways. We're going to talk about their prices, a pro and a con, and then we're going to put them in a specific tier. So starting with Canva. Where should Canva go? Well, Canva is pretty much a really user-friendly web-based design tool. And it has a drag and drop feature. It has a whole bunch of stuff. It offers so much more than just print on demand. So for example, if you want to create social media stuff, if you want to create slideshows, presentations, invoices, you can do so much more than just print on demand with it. So where should it go? I'm going to put it in meh. There's a reason for this, because this video is about the best design tools for print on demand, not the best design tools in general. So I'm very much focused on what design tools will help you create print on demand designs and will be good for that. So this costs $15 a month, and this is for the monthly, not the yearly. I'm doing all of this based on the monthly. And then let's just quickly go through one of the major pros. One of the major pros is that Canva have a huge library of fonts and graphics and templates that you could use. It's a relatively cheap option to create very basic designs. And I sometimes use Canva to create text-based designs, but being realistic, I mostly use Canva to create like social media stuff and content and invoices rather than actual print on demand designs. A huge drawback is it lacks a lot of advanced features. Now, I know Canva did recently go through a huge update. So actually, you know what? Because of that huge update that they recently went through, maybe it is worth a try because it added a whole bunch of new features, which are really, really cool. But I think another big con or like negative is that the templates and the graphics are very overused by lots of people. So it's hard to actually come up with something unique using Canva. The verdict, like I said, I usually use Canva for very, very basic text-only designs. But when I do use Canva, I'm using it more to create social media stuff, invoices, presentations, that kind of thing. Let's put Kittl somewhere. Where should Kittl go? Kittl is very similar to Canva, except it's more specialized in print on demand. Even though they might not consider themselves specialized for print on demand, I think they are based on what people use it for, based on the templates, the fonts, the graphics, all of that kind of stuff. Kittl used to be quite expensive, but they seem to have matched Canva's pricing at $15 a month for their pro version. They do have another version that's even more expensive, but I don't think it's necessary. So Kittl, well, a huge pro of Kittl is it leads the way in terms of typography. It is amazing for typography. The amount of fonts that you have, the manipulation that you could do to them, it's very, very cool. And then a new pro, which was a new feature they recently added, was artboards, which allows you to kind of have multiple artboards. You can work on various projects at the same time, and I find that very, very useful. Now, a bit of a drawback is Kittl has a particular look, a particular style, and because it's this niche kind of tool, I'm not the biggest fan of their graphics, and their graphics are all kind of similar in this specific style, and I'm just not the biggest fan. And of course, like Canva, it lacks a lot of advanced features. It's also a web-based tool. So where would I put it? I put it between worth a try and meh. I'm going to put it in worth a try because it's, why not? You know, it is expensive. Maybe just do the trial, see if you like it. You can come up with some pretty good designs on it. And one of the main areas I use Kittl for these days is simple text-based designs. And I very occasionally upload SVG files, SVG graphics to Kittle. I add my own text to it, and I manipulate the colors of that SVG file, which you can do on Kittle. Annoyingly though, you don't really have that many other manipulation tools, so like I can't really do much else to the SVG file. It's kind of annoying, but it is worth a try. The next one is Photoshop. Photoshop is an incredibly powerful tool, kind of focusing more on photo manipulation, less print-on-demand designs. It's very much overkill for print-on-demand, and well, saying that, it has a huge tool set of features that it can do. Literally, it can do so much. Now, in terms of cost, the pricing is a little bit weird. If you just want to pay for Photoshop, it's $22.99 a month, but you can pay for Photoshop and Lightroom, which is another Adobe app, which is $19.99. So I don't really understand their pricing. And then you can pay for the entire suite of apps, which is like 10 plus apps, even more than that. And it's only a little bit more. So their pricing is a bit weird, but if you just went for Photoshop, it's $22.99 a month. Now, one of the huge pros with Photoshop is, well, it has no limits, right? It's insanely advanced, which is, I guess, also one of its drawbacks because it's super confusing to use, especially for a beginner. But I guess at the end of the day, a huge pro is because of the amount of tools and the capability it has, it allows you to pretty much create whatever you want to create. But going to the drawback, it's insanely complex. The learning curve for Photoshop is massive, which is why I don't recommend it for print-on-demand sellers. I use Photoshop because I've been using it for the last 15 years, so it makes sense for me to use it. I started using it for photo manipulation, and then I now just use it as like a quick tool to use. It's very weird, it's very unorthodox, and I don't recommend doing that. So I'm going to put Photoshop in the wouldn't bother because it's not shite. Photoshop is incredible. It's not meh. I mean, I think it's god tier. Photoshop is incredible, but because this is a print-on-demand specific video trying to find the best design tool for print-on-demand sellers, I'd put it in wouldn't bother because I wouldn't really bother for print-on-demand. The next is Affinity Designer. Affinity Designer is a vector graphic tool. It's incredibly affordable, which I really like, and it has one-off pricing, which is not something you really see with any other tool. Its price is $69.99, but they often have sales. I looked on their website and they currently have a sale which is $35. And then on top of that, in our community, we get a further discount on it. So you can get it even cheaper, something like 20-something bucks. It's ridiculously cheap. So they very frequently have sales. So even though it says $70, you could pretty much get it a lot cheaper, probably more than half of that cost. Now, in terms of pros, Affinity has all the bells and whistles. It has everything that you need to create print-on-demand style designs. It's perfect for print-on-demand. One of the drawbacks is you don't get a huge amount of fonts or graphics. Like you would with Kittle or Canva, it's not that kind of tool. It's similar to Illustrator or Photoshop in that sense, where the tool itself is what you're using, like the being able to edit and create photos, rather than the tool being a place where you can find fonts and find graphics. Now, another drawback is it's somewhat of a new tool, so there's definitely improvements to be made. On top of that, there's also a learning curve for it. It's not as simple as, using Kittle or using Canva. But saying that, I do think it's worth it. I think it's one of the best tools for print on demand, and especially at this price point, it is unbeatable, really. We use Affinity a lot for our designs. Now, my wife, Lauren, she does most of the Affinity work. Like I said, I'm very unorthodox, so I'll do my work on Photoshop. Sometimes I'll throw them into Figma and I'll mess around with them or whatever. But I'm very unorthodox, whereas Lauren, who studied design and is a lot more methodical with what she's doing with her designs, she will use Affinity because it is the perfect tool to use for print on demand. So Affinity is going to go bang into God tier. Highly recommend using it, learning how to use it. It's a real game changer with print on demand. The next tool is Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. What should we do with this one? Well, Adobe Illustrator is pretty much God tier level when it comes to vector graphic tools. It's basically Affinity on steroids. It's got everything you could possibly need. However, that comes with a few drawbacks, but also a few positives. So let's go through them. The first one is, well, before we even get to that, the price. It's, again, $22.99. a month, just like Photoshop is. And you can obviously, let's say you're going to go for Photoshop and Illustrator, and you're going to be spending $45, $46 a month. At that point, you may as well just go for the entire Adobe suite, which is cheaper. So yeah, like I said, their pricing is very weird. So with Adobe Illustrator, you can create very detailed, scalable designs. You can manipulate them. You can do all sorts of stuff to them. It's a really powerful tool. But saying that, it might be slightly overkill. Now, similar to Photoshop, it's incredibly complex for a beginner. There is so much for you to learn. The learning curve, it's absolutely massive. It's great for print on demand. Don't get me wrong. It's probably would be the best print on demand and just graphic designers tool. However, is it necessary for print on demand? Do you need something that confusing and complicated and complex? Probably not. So personally, I don't think it's necessary for print on demand. Now, if you know how to use it, then it goes up here in God tier. If you know how to use Adobe Illustrator, then it's the best. If you don't know how to use it, then I would put it in wouldn't bother, because it just doesn't seem worth the time to learn how to use it when you can learn how to use Affinity, which is a lot easier. The next is Figma. Now, Figma has a web app and an actual computer app, and I love Figma. It's amazing for collaborative design. So, anyone on our team, if me and Lauren are both working on a design at the same time, we can do that. And it's just so user friendly. Now, Figma is free, which is a massive, massive benefit, like brilliant. And on top of that, it has a lot of cool features. However, I wouldn't necessarily say it's specific for print on demand. Figma is aimed more at the UI UX audience, not necessarily people creating t-shirt designs. Now, saying that, you can upload an SVG file to Figma, manipulate it, change the colors, change the shapes, do all these sorts of things, add cool text, but it's not as good as like Affinity or something like that. So I guess at the end of the day, it lacks a lot of good features that would be very useful for print on demand people. So I'm not going to put it in wouldn't bother because it's free and it's a great useful resource. I'm not going to put it in God tier because it just doesn't have everything that you need. I'm going to put it in worth a try because it's free. It is really good. We use it. We talk about it a lot in our community. And if you know how to use it, it can be very, very beneficial. And of course, great for someone on a budget. The next is GIMP. Oh, GIMP. Okay, so GIMP is... What should we do with GIMP? GIMP is an open source tool. It's incredibly powerful. It has a lot of professional grade features. It's really, 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 really good. It's basically a free alternative to Photoshop. And I've always wondered why it's free. So where would it go? Because if it's a free alternative to Photoshop, but I'm putting Photoshop in wouldn't bother. I guess I've put Photoshop in wouldn't bother because of its complexity. But saying that, GIMP does come with complexities like Photoshop. So let's just go with the pro first. GIMP is free. Obviously, that's a huge pro. And it has capabilities like Photoshop. And that is amazing. If you think of it like that, it's not really geared towards print on demand. It's geared more to photo manipulation again. So it's not really a print on demand tool that I would recommend. If you are looking for something like Photoshop with full customization, something that let's say you want to use Photoshop for print on demand, but you don't want to spend that money, then yes, GIMP would be a very good alternative. Now, there are a few drawbacks, such as it is not as fast. It can be quite clunky, which is annoying. The UI isn't as good or intuitive as Photoshop, but that is understandable because it is free at the end of the day. Now, personally, I don't use GIMP. And the reason for that is I use Photoshop and I'm happy to pay for it. I've used it for 15 years plus. I just don't need to use GIMP. Now, that's not to say GIMP is bad. What I would say is for print on demand, I'm not going to say it's worth a try. I'm not going to say it's God tier. I know it's free, so that makes it very good. However, I still think it's overkill for print on demand. I don't think you need it for print on demand in order to make good, successful designs. But I wouldn't put it in wouldn't bother because it is free. So I'm going to put it in the meh because it doesn't really have a place. It's not shite, not at all. It's not that I wouldn't bother with it, but I also don't think it's worth a try, if that makes sense. You might disagree with me and that's completely fine. But I think for print on demand specifically, It's just a bit meh. I don't think it's necessary. The next is Photopea, or Photopea, however you want to call it. And this is pretty much the same as GIMP. I'm going to put this straight into the meh category. This is another tool similar to Photoshop. It's a web-based editor that allows you to edit PSDs, which is kind of cool. It's free, which is brilliant as well. But I just, again, I don't think you need it. It's a bit slow. It's not as good as Photoshop, but it is free, so that kind of is understandable. But I don't think it's necessary for print on demand. And then you've got Inkscape. Where should Inkscape go? Okay, well, first, what is Inkscape? This is an open source tool for vector graphics specifically. So this probably is in close competition with Illustrator and Affinity. It's free. That's a huge pro. And it's pretty powerful. The fact that it's free helps a lot. And the amount of things you can do with it is pretty impressive. I think it's very cool. Where do you think it should go? Honestly, it's going to be between God tier and worth a try. I think I'm going to put it in worth a try. And the reason for it is this. The user interface isn't nearly as good as paid options. So it's not nearly as good as Affinity or Illustrator. It's okay, but it's not as good. And with the one-off fee that Affinity has, I think it's worth it for the speed and the UI, because Inkscape can also be a little bit sluggish at times. But if you're on a very tight budget and you can't afford Affinity, then Inkscape would probably go into God tier for you and be worth your time. At the end of the day, a design tool is totally personal. So you need to kind of try them out and see what works best for you. And you can use this as like a gauge of where to even start. So like I said, I wouldn't bother with the two Adobe ones. I think they're overkill for print on demand. Again, I wouldn't bother with GIMP or Photopea. Also overkill, too complicated. Even though they're free, probably not worth it. I do really rate Affinity. I think Canva and Kittle are worth a try for the more basic designs. Figma is free and pretty cool, so why not? And Inkscape is free, and just, you know, if you can't afford Affinity, then it makes sense to give it a go. Another thing to consider are there are tools that come with fonts and graphics like the Canva and the Kittle, and then there are tools where the whole point of the tool is for you to create designs from scratch using the tool, which is why things like Canva and Kittle don't have that many advanced features or manipulation features or creation features, whereas you know, Affinity, Adobe, Illustrator, Inkscape, all these other ones have a lot more powerful features at their disposal because you don't have all the graphics and the fonts to work from. For me, my go-to thing is to use Creative Fabrica or Creative Market to download fonts and graphics, and then occasionally I'll put them into Figma. Sometimes I'll put them into Kittle. Most of the time, Lauren puts them into Affinity. And then me being me and being totally unorthodox with this, I put them into Photoshop sometimes and mess around with them. Of course, this is after potentially vectorizing them, which I would use my designs for, but that's not a design tool, so I didn't want to put that in here. But I would vectorize them, I'd potentially upscale them, and do all sorts. If I'm downloading an SVG, I wouldn't need to vectorize it. I wouldn't need to upscale it. And when I'm using Creative Fabrica and Creative Market, I'm pretty much only downloading SVGs. It's more when I'm using AI like Midjourney and DALL-E and Ideogram. That's when I'll put it into a vectorizer or an upscaler. But I've got a separate video coming out on AI. But that is my process when it comes to creating designs. These are the tools that I would recommend. Let me know in the comments below if you'd agree. I feel like this is going to spark some sort of debate because there's just so many tools out there and people really fall into specific camps of tools that they like. But anyways, thank you for watching. If you haven't already smashed that subscribe button, please help me, well, hit 100,000 subscribers if I haven't already done it. But if not, please help me hit 100,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.